Well, hi, hello, and welcome to Perfecting Security Hardening One Step at a Time. Now, today's webinar is sponsored by Fortra and produced by ActualTech Media. My name is Jess Steinbach. I'm with ActualTech Media, and I'm so happy that I get to be your moderator for this conversation because today we are going to take a very important step together, a step backwards. Not in progress. We're not going backwards in progress, but we are going to step back. We're going to zoom out and we're going to take that good wide angle view of our systems. A little scary, I know. Then with the help of our incredible expert we have here with us today from Fortra, we will explore security hardening, what it means to close all those potential points of entry over the entire scope of your system, from applications to servers, the whole enchilada. We are going to get key insights today on how you can increase system functionality and reduce complexity in your environment, as well as those best practices to address and avoid vulnerabilities in your system. If you are a security hardening expert, or this might be the first time you've ever heard those words put together, either way, there is going to be something great, something fascinating, something interesting, and something for you to take away from our discussion today. Now, I am going to zip through a few of the important housekeeping points and then get us on our way with our incredible expert speaker waiting in the wings with us right now. First, I want to draw your attention to the question section of your webinar console, because the best part of a webinar just like this one is the chance to ask questions directly of an expert presenter like we have here with us today. On top of that, our speaker, who I'm going to introduce in just a moment, is watching those questions come in. We've got some polls. There's going to be a lot of real-time interaction, and we're going to be adjusting the content as we go through to make sure that we are meeting you where you need and what you're interested in, what's going to be most helpful to you. So be sure you're getting those questions and answering those polls. We want to be hearing from you throughout the day. Now, we can give that a little bit of a test run right now. You can say hi, hello, I see you, John, I see you, Jorge, I see you, Ed, Rakesh. We've got a whole crew here with us today. So we want to be hearing from you. Give those highs and hellos a little test wave right now. Say what's up to the community. Tell us how your day is going. What are you doing this morning besides learning some cool stuff? So hopefully we'll hear from you there. And that window, that questions window, is also going to be the best place to reach out to us and let us know if you do have any technical issues today. Knock on wood, as always. But hey, if the tech gremlins have a hold of you, here's step one. Step one, browser refresh. That's going to clear out almost all of those usual gremlins. But if they're really clinging on today and you need a little extra support, you're going to shoot a message in that questions window to the ActualTech Media team, and we will be there to help you out. Okay, so that's the questions window. We're going to take one step over to the handouts tab. It's right side by side there. And in the handouts tab, there are some incredible resources, really cool content takeaways that you are going to want to explore after we wrap up. We're going to get a lot of information today, and you're going to want to hold on to all of it in your brain, but there's only so much we can store in there, right? And depending on the day, sometimes a little more, a little less. So those resources in the handouts tab are going to be a great way to dig in a bit further and spend a little bit more time exploring some of the cool and exciting things we're learning today about security hardening. So be sure you've got those. And it is not just awesome content that we have for all of you today. In even extra good news, we have a $250 Amazon gift card that we will be giving away as a prize drawing at the end of our webinar. You do need to be here in live attendance, and you do need to meet the ActualTech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those are, you can click back over to that handouts tab we were just talking about, scroll down to the very bottom, and you will find the full terms and conditions waiting for you there. Now, not only does asking a question today help inform our conversation, help bring us through, make sure that we're getting you the info that you need when you need it, it also enters you to win an additional prize. We have a best question gift card that we will be giving away. That's a $50 Amazon gift card that's going to the best question asked. We are reviewing all of the questions after we wrap. So even if we don't get to your question in our live Q&A with our speaker today, you are still entered to win. So get those questions in, because you get a gold star from me for participation. You get an A+ for engagement, and there's a chance you could win that $50 Amazon gift card. All right, well, that is it for all the housekeeping stuff. That was a lot we had to cover. Hopefully you stayed with me through all of that, because we are about to get into the good stuff. And I am so excited to introduce you all to our expert speaker here with us today. And I know you are all going to really enjoy this conversation. We will be chatting today with David Henderson, Manager Solutions Engineering at Fortra. I'm going to get David on here with me. Hi, David. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
And hey, how are you? Hope everybody's having a great day.
We're having a great day, and it's only going up from here, David, because we have a lot to get into, and we wanted to start things out with a question for the audience. What we're wondering is, what is most important to your security team? So let us know, are vulnerability assessment, hardening, cybersecurity, audits, or hey, all of the above. David, when you look at this, what are you kind of expecting to see the responses back being?
All of the above. And when you're talking about hardening, all of those things are important to hardening systems. And but vulnerability management looks like some of the guys are selecting that, and that's very important too. But in my opinion, anyway, vulnerability management might be something, or vulnerability assessment might be something you do up front, but it's generally get my systems hardened, and then let's see, after we've installed our applications and things of that nature, how vulnerable we are. So they're all very important, but all of the above is what I expect.
Well, should we show the audience what they said?
Sure.
Let's do it. All right, folks, here are your results. So it looks like the audience kind of agrees with you there, David. They're in the all of the above category.
Yep, every one of those things are important to a security system and to the health of the security.
Yeah, and so the good news is that's what you're going to take us through today is understanding this holistic picture, this whole big story. The all of the above answer is going to get unpacked a little bit. So I'm going to step back. I'm going to join you again for a poll, but start walking us through the all of the above package, David.
Okay, will do. And so again, thanks everybody for giving us the time to present to you today. Our topic is going to be perfecting security, hardening one step at a time. And with that, I'm going to move through the slides. And so, you may ask yourself, what is hardening? I've got a couple of definitions here. One of them comes from National Institutes of Standards, which defines hardening as a process used to patch vulnerabilities or turn off essential services. Of course, the goal there is to make sure that you're limiting the attack vectors that are available. And as you may see in the second definition, which may even be more important, is that server hardening is hardening process that aims to protect and secure server infrastructure against cyber attacks by reducing the most important part here, its attack surface. Okay, so an attack surface consists of all possible points of a system where an unauthorized attacker can attempt to enter. And so that's very important. And so how do we reduce that attack surface? We'll target that question today. Okay, so these might be some of the steps that you hear about in your quest to get your infrastructures hardened, and maybe something that you guys think about on a regular basis. Is my data center in the right place? Do I have, not in the right place, but do I have all my servers in a data center that's located in a very secure environment? Okay, and do I have tools in place that allow me to do vulnerability assessment and to deploy patches? Okay, do I have tools in-house that allow me to look at the configurations of my systems and look at the permissions and alert me when configurations happen or configurations change or when permissions change on things? Do I know who my users are? And you may ask this question, why do I have all this software? Understand what software is on your infrastructure and why it's there. And they'll help you to determine whether or not it's needed. Okay, so there's no need to have software out there on your environment that is not needed. Okay, so all you're doing is potentially introducing vulnerabilities into the system as time passes. So making sure that you have only the software that's allowed or authorized in your environment deployed is very important. And of course, restricting site access, that's something that's very important as well. So what is this? If I'm doing all these things on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis, that's continuously monitoring, okay? And it's got to be continuous, no pause. And The other big thing that might be missing off the slide is one big word that says integrity, the overall integrity of my environment. Okay, so let's move on from there. And so with this particular slide, I'm going to hit a couple of buttons here. What you don't want to do is you do not want to have changes that are happening in your environment control your organization. You want your organization to be able to control the change or authorize the changes that are happening in the environment to keep you secure. Okay, so you don't want to be reactive. Okay, that's where over 50% of your staff's time is being spent on unplanned work. Definitely don't want to be in using the honor system where 35 to 50% of your time is still spent on unplanned work. But you do want to have like closed loop processes in place where you're getting down to the point where 15 to 35% of the time spent on unplanned work and the rest is spent on planned work and continuously improving. That's where you really want to get to. Under 5% of your time is spent on unplanned work. So manage by fact. Do not go by the belief that I am secure. Okay, I think I'm secure is not a good answer to the question, are you secure? So anyway, hopefully you may begin at level 1, but you work through the process, you get to level 4. Okay, so this is an interesting slide because this is where you've got a situation where I'm down here because maybe I've got a brand new infrastructure and I'm trying to get to up here, okay, to a compliant or a secure hardened state. And so it takes time to get to that level, okay? But once I get up there, I'm compliant, but you'll also notice at the top of the bar here that change is constantly occurring in the environment, daily, hourly, changes happen. Okay, so how do we combat that? And you may find out that we'll take a look at this, that you're introducing risk into your environment if you're not staying on top of all those changes. So in this particular situation, I've gone maybe through a fire drill to get to a compliant state, and maybe right at this peak an auditor comes in and audits my systems. I'm good, I relax, system individuals on my staff relax, and things start to get loose. Next thing you know, I'm back down here, I've introduced risk into my system. 6 months later, another auditor's coming in, bam, fire drill again to get back to that compliant state. This is what you don't want to do. What you do want to do is you want to have this type of an environment put in place, okay, where you've gone to the point where you've gotten compliant, okay, you've reached that compliant state, and you're assessing and achieving the state and then maintaining the state. So yes, changes are occurring, but you're aware of those changes. Alerts are being sent through email or through other means of receiving alerts, and you're reducing your attack surface because you're staying compliant. So as those changes occur in your environment that impact your compliant or your hardened state, you're taking care of those, okay, continuously keeping yourself at that audit ready compliant state. Okay, so let's move on. And so here's some challenges. Streamlining the process. Okay, these are things that too much data to manage, high cost. Okay, these are things that I hear quite a bit. Okay, it's too labor intensive, it takes too long to get compliant, takes away from me achieving my objectives. I want to sell widgets, I don't want to be working on IT stuff all day long. Okay, well, unfortunately, you've got to take care of what you might call the remedial things, or some people may refer it to that, in order to get to the point where you can sell those widgets and sell them successfully. And maybe when you're looking at configuration, that there's too much system configuration monitoring and log retention management data to sift through. I just don't have time to look through that. I need to be out there, like I said, selling widgets and making money for my company. Okay, so, and then there's the high cost that you may assume is a limited return, is I spent a whole lot of money getting secure, but I'm really getting any kind of return on it. Well, you may find out that you're getting a huge amount of return when you start looking at statistics of the numbers of individual connections that have been blocked or been stopped into your infrastructure due to the fact that you're hardened. What you don't want to get to a point where a breach occurs and all of a sudden, whoops, there we go. Sorry, I had a pop-up on my screen that blocked the slide. But anyway, the fact is that you do not want to get to a point where a breach has occurred, and now you're really seeing that, what a high cost is. Okay, the high cost of a breach just completely overwhelms the cost of getting secure to begin with. Okay, so let's move on from there. This is something you guys may want to, and gals, you may want to consider. Okay, are you using or following the risk management framework? Okay, that's special publication 800-37. If you haven't read it, I would read it. It's all about preparation, getting prepared, categorizing your information systems, selecting security controls that you need to have in place, implementing those security controls, assessing the security controls to make sure they're in place and working, and authorizing new information systems, and then monitoring security state. Okay, so the monitoring of the security state implies that I've got something in there that's monitoring what's going on my endpoints and monitoring what's going on my network on a regular, continuous basis. And so, the risk management framework lays all that out. If you haven't read it, I recommend that you definitely go and pull that special pub and take a look at it. Okay, so these are some questions that I throw out there to managers, or maybe important to managers. I may hear these things from managers. I need to respond to an audit. Okay, I am unable to hold internal people accountable, so I need solutions. It's difficult to demonstrate our compliance. The solutions that we have are just too hard to utilize. The amount of time and resources that's being spent on compliance is a drain on my staff. Okay, so some of the things that managers may be complaining about, or maybe trying to get executive staff to support them to purchase or to put into place the right tools so that a lot of these issues that the managers deal with on a regular basis are minimized or go away. Okay, so and here's some of the things you might hear from a security team. Okay, do any of these sound familiar? I am not 100% confident that I know where my assets are and what all my vulnerabilities are. Okay, so that just basically says that I need some tools, I need some help. And, we get lots of false positives and security event data overload. My staff is too small. I don't have enough people to manage what we consider to be false positives, and to, who's going to go through all this security data, all this data that's coming into this log management system that I have. I don't have it set up to where it's automating things for me. So I've got staff that are actually constantly looking through raw event data, trying to find a needle in a haystack. And so, we need some help there. I need to secure my servers. Okay, and we keep pouring dollars into security, but we still have incidents. Okay, so we're, obviously we need somebody to guide us. What are we doing wrong? So these are the types of things that you hear from security teams. Okay, and so looks like it's time here to ask a question.
Or a poll. It's poll time. It's
right,
everyone's
exactly,
favorite time. Okay, folks. So here's David's question for all of you. What tools do you consider to be foundational? Now, this is multi-select. So on this one, if you think that you have more than one that is absolutely foundational to how you think about your security portfolio, click on multiples. David, what are you kind of expecting to see here? What is there anything that would be concerning if you saw? What do you got for us?
I think email. Obviously everybody uses email on a daily basis, so that's got to have a high priority to make sure my email is secure, and that my individual teams are educated enough to know what a true email is and what a phishing email is and things of that nature, and can actually get that information back to the IT team or the security team so investigation can happen. So email, I think, is important. Again, vulnerability assessments, obviously important. And that's probably the number one tool that's utilized out there. The problem, and believe me, vulnerability assessment is very, very, very important, because it helps you to determine where holes are, or backdoors or exploits are in software. And but the other aspect that has to be looked at is the operating system. So we need to make sure that the operating system is secure to potentially some type of a policy or compliance standard. So all these are important, but I would say probably email and is probably number one.
If this was the kind of thing, are these something, David, that you could put a prioritization order to this, or it's sort of everything is equally important and it's more just what you do first in terms of what makes sense to your organization, or would you say one is like top of the list?
Yeah, I think that, an email obviously is an application. If
Okay.
I'm building out an infrastructure, then I'm trying to make sure my infrastructure is hardened and that I maybe run vulnerability scans up front to make sure that I don't see any vulnerabilities. Then I may start applying my applications. And when I start applying my applications, which will include email applications, then I'll
Mm,
continually run vulnerability assessment again to make sure that, the applications I've deployed don't have any known vulnerabilities in them and that need to be corrected. And then I'll start to, obviously, if I've deployed my email applications out there, I begin to build my user base and educate my users on, what a phishing email is. And fortunately, the company that I work for actually has tools that cover phishing, scanning, blocking, and education for individuals that may need to be educated on, what to look for when they're reading emails or receiving emails. So
that's the full trifecta. Hey, you've got the scanning and the protecting and the training side of it. You have to have kind of all of those. And I'm going to show everyone
absolutely.
their results now so we can see if you were. So you had sort of said you thought you would see email pretty high, and then that email that you would agree with that email is one of the most important. And it looks like we're seeing a pretty high percentage going towards the vulnerability assessment, which makes sense. If you don't know where you're weak, you don't know what you need to build, and then email kind of right after that. Is what we're seeing here in terms of results sort of in line with what you would hope to see, David?
Yep, absolutely, because almost everything here is important, and that's why I
Mm,
put it on the list because they're all important. So yes, I can see individuals, selecting more than one item. What I would say on like antivirus, it looks like 51% of the participants selected antivirus. Antivirus is something that is, I hate to use the word commodity, but it's something that every environment out there has literally on every workstation.
mm,
Unfortunately, most antivirus tools still require a .dat file of some sort and an update. It might be daily, might be every other day, etc., but an update to that .dat file. And fortunately, I should say unfortunately, the hackers out there, the bad guys out there in the dark world, they have those antivirus tools too and those .dat files. And so they're working hard to create viruses that are not going to be exposed or alerted on or captured by these antivirus tools. And those are called zero-day. So
right.
a zero-day malicious file, a zero-day malicious application may end up on a system. It may get past that antivirus. So you need to have other tools in place that are looking at that. And that literally is where integrity comes in. And that falls at, it looks like 38% of the people selected that. And because integrity can be running in real time, it can pick up those files that have landed on my system and escaped through the antivirus. Maybe it was an attachment to an email that somebody clicked on and dropped the file to disk, and it's executable. Integrity system will alert on that immediately, capture the hash data, and then institute possibly a threat intelligence scan to see whether or not that hash is known vulnerability or a known indicator of compromise, I should say. If not, put it into a sandbox, explode it, see what kind of activity or behavior is happening with that file. If it looks like it's malicious, flag it as malicious and alert. So there's other tools out there that can be used to capture zero-day. Okay.
Mm.
And so anyway, yeah, this is pretty much what I would expect to see. Yes.
Well, that's good news. That's we're no crazy wild outliers. I did see a couple people selecting the other, and if you do, or if you're interested in writing in, feel free to write that into the questions window and let us know what you would add to the list and what is on your list that you didn't see here, because certainly we are curious about that. But David, I'm going to hand things over to you because I think we've got a lot more to cover before we get into our Q&A. So take it away.
Okay. Next slide here. Okay, so how can we help? Okay, and so this is one of the things that I'm going to showcase a little bit of some slides from a product called Tripwire, which is one of the tools that Fortra owns. And so Tripwire is how can Tripwire help support your hardening and help you to get to that compliant or continuous compliance state? And we do that by providing the ability for you to demonstrate compliance with standards. Okay, so Tripwire has the industry's most comprehensive library of policy tests and major standards, where there's over 3,000 policy and OS combinations in the library. And so that's something that, and the other thing I would say with this particular tool with Tripwire, the auditors out there are very familiar with Tripwire, and it's specific reports that auditors like to see out of that tool, and that likely comes from the fact that Tripwire was founded as a company in 1998. Okay, so they've been doing compliance and they've been doing integrity for that many years, and so they've been around. And so we can also help that you reduce the amount of time you spend on compliance, because we have out-of-the-box audit report templates and automated compliance reporting. Okay, we also provide you with the remediation guidance, which you'll see me talk about a little bit more later. Okay, so we also provide you with the ability to produce data for audits and forensics. Again, logging all changes that are in scope with your assets, and with the details on who making changes, when those changes are made, what the impact of those changes happen to be. Maintain compliance over time. That's what we're all about. Continuously monitoring, reporting to flag remediation. I'd like to stop a little bit here and talk about how that works. Okay, if I were to pick a security or regulatory compliance policy such as CIS or HIPAA or SOX or NERC or DISA or NIST, whatever it might be, that my company PCI may have to be compliant to, okay, to help harden the systems, okay, get them to that compliant, hardened state where I'm going to pass my audits, okay, then we're providing all of the technical tests, okay, required to be able to assess what your endpoints look like. And we do that by running a baseline, okay? And running a baseline basically says that I'm going to take all of the security controls, okay, that exist on the endpoints, harvest the data around those security controls, put it in my backend database, and then I'm going to link a policy test to those security controls. So when I run the policy test, it looks at the data that was harvested. Key point here, it's sitting in the backend database, okay, and determine whether I have pass or fail. If I'm failing that, then what do I need to do to get it corrected, okay? So what kind of guidance do I have there? Now, the other aspect to that is that those endpoints, just like having an antivirus tool sitting out there on all those endpoints, you've got an agent sitting there that is keeping that backend database up to date, okay? So the point being that if the boss comes in and says, hey, Susan, I want you to run a report and tell me how compliant my systems are in the mailroom versus my systems that are in the payroll department, okay? So Susan's like, oh my gosh, you mean I got to run scans on all these systems? And wait a minute, I need to remember which systems belong to the mailroom and which systems belong to finance, okay, before I can do that. No, not with this product. With this product, and you can use Asset View within the product to tag systems as being part of the mailroom, or tag systems as being part of the, the finance or any other department, if you wish. But using that tagging concept allows me to just go ahead and run a quick report on compliance for the mailroom, another report on compliance for the finance department, or combine them into a single report and provide it to your manager within a matter of minutes, okay? No scanning the endpoints, don't have to do that. That data is in the backend database and it's continuously up to date based on agents pushing information as changes that affect security controls happen on the environment, okay, or in the environment. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this, and I just kind of went through it a little bit. In this particular view that you're looking at, this is a security configuration management or security configuration monitoring, compliance report, or a view using the DISA-STIGs, okay, which is the U.S. government uses that within the Department of Defense and on a very heavily daily basis. Okay, so in this particular case, what we're looking at is a report of the systems that are being monitored on the left and how many tests passed, how many tests failed, and how compliant those systems happen to be. I'm going to hit, oh, here we go. I skipped the slide. I thought I did. Let me go back one. This particular slide, this is where you would start. So this is actually a dashboard in the product called Tripwire Enterprise. And you'll see there's trending reports for Linux, trending reports for Windows, and those can be based on weeks, months, dates, biannually, annually, etc. And then you'll see an overall summary that says, hey, here's how many tests passed, here's how many tests failed in my environment. And then down below, because this happens to be DISA categorizes their test as Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3, Cat 4, Cat 1 being the most important, Cat 4 being the least important. So you can also look at those and drill down into them as well. So if I were to click on this summary report, for instance, that's what this is, okay? So the summary report shows me that, hey, here's the systems I'm looking at, here's how many tests passed, here's how many failed, here's what my compliance score happens to be, okay? And then you'll see that these are links, okay? So each of these values are linked, so I can take a look at that by drilling down into it. And so if I do that and I drill down, then I may get to this where I'm looking at a category 1 test here that literally is about verifying the current service pack is approved, okay? And so this happens to be a Windows policy test, and you'll see here that we provide remediation guidance on what you need to do, and these, by the way, are failed tests. You'll see down here under the status, you failed it. And so the remediation guidance will tell you by operating system, whether it's Windows. Literally, we still cover some systems out there, customers that have systems that are running Windows XP still. Okay, so let's go back there, all the way to Windows XP, all the way up to Windows Server 2022. Okay, and we'll break the guidance out by OS if there's a difference. Okay, and so the other thing that you can do when you're looking at these, and also you'll also notice that when you're looking at, since this happens to be Windows, I probably should mention this, most of the security controls in Windows, probably 85% of them are housed in Active Directory. Okay, so you may see the remediation guidance steps in here for what controls need to be modified in Active Directory. And then the last step may say run GP update. Okay, so you'll see that for a lot of the security controls on the Windows side. But the other thing you can do is say, you know what, I can't do anything with this. This current service pack, that's what I've had to have deployed. Otherwise, I'm going to break applications if I put a new one on there. So then you can click on this test results view button up here for a simpler view. Okay, so let's see what does that look like. If I did click on that, then I have the ability here to add a waiver. And that's the point I want to make. So here's the simplified view of all the failed tests. And I can click on the date and time to see what the actual results were for that specific policy test. I can also go up here and click on new waiver to add a waiver. And I want to talk about that in detail here in a second. But this other thing that's worth mentioning here is open remediation work order. If you want to use this, you don't have to, but it is built into this particular product. You can click on this open work order up here, and it will literally open up a work order that's built into the tool, okay? And then it'll kick off a process, and it's literally a workflow that says, hey, send this over to my manager, whoever that might be, to approve remediating these specific failed tests that I added to this work order. Okay, when I say remediating, I'm talking about automatically remediating them. Okay, so that individual has to have a good awareness of what can be remediated without causing issues in the environment, okay, breaking applications, things of that nature. So that individual who may be your boss, or could just be somebody else, this is a role-based access control product, so it could be somebody else that's a security expert on your network that is reviewing that work order and approving what can and cannot be remediated. Okay, so once that approval is done, then it moves to the next stage to actually get remediated. Okay, where there's actually a button in the tool, then once it's approved, that says remediate. Okay, and so there's a full policy editor in the product that allows you to add your remediation steps. When I say remediation steps, a command that executes, that corrects something, a script that runs that corrects something or puts something back into its proper state, etc. So that full editor is built into the tool as well. So let's move on here. But this is what it looks like if I'm going to add a waiver. I give it a name, I select the policy that is applied to it, who's granting it, who's responsible for it, a little bit of a description, and whether or not there's an expiration date, okay, on the waiver. Okay, once I've done that, then I'm going to click literally next and add all the nodes that this waiver applies to, and then click finish, and the waiver will be put in place. And this tool has a full set of waiver reports as well. Adding waivers is beneficial because it takes your compliance score up. Okay, so if you're at 72%, you add waivers, you may be at 75% compliant. Okay, but you'll also see in the scoring reports my score, raw score, and my score with waivers. Okay, so let's just move on and talk a little bit about something that I'd mentioned before, which is continuously monitoring. Okay, and this is a potential issue that a lot of people have today because they just don't have that continuous monitoring tool in-house. And that continuous monitoring set of tools can include vulnerability management tools such as Fortra VM, okay? And Tripwire also has a product called Tripwire IP360, which is vulnerability assessment. However, it's worth noting that IP360 from Tripwire and Frontline, which is another company that Fortra owns, are being merged, and that merged tool is called Fortra VM, which is a SaaS tool, but it can also be ran on-prem as well. So in this particular case, this is continuous monitoring. So we're not just looking at compliance state, which we just showed you before, but this is telling me what kind of changes that are happening in my environment by local administrative staff, how many changes are approved versus unapproved, or authorized versus unauthorized, changes to my shares, and my certificates. And down here, you'll see some items that are of importance. Okay, this is sampling of available cyber crime controls. That's what this is. And so, changes to DNS, changes to installed software, new executables. Okay, obviously that's very important. Network shares, you might see scheduled tasks, startup tasks, open ports, established ports, local groups, local users. There's all kinds of things in there that can be monitored on my endpoints that don't involve something tangible. So when I say something tangible, configuration files, which is something that's very, very important, especially if you have Linux systems, because most of the security controls on a Linux system are in a file somewhere on the system, okay? Such as like etc login.definitions, login.defs. And that particular file controls a lot of the logging categorizations, such as warning age, password lengths, things of that nature. And so anyway, the bottom line is that a lot of these items are not in a file. So how am I supposed to assess, for instance, what ports are baselined on my systems? Well, you run a command, right? netstat -an, maybe pipe it to grep or to find string and look for the word established or the word listening. And maybe I'm looking for listening to begin with. So I baseline my system to that. I know what ports are running, what ports should be running tomorrow, what ports should be running the next day. Excuse me. If there's new software installed on my system that happens to be authorized, then I may have some new ports. So I may see a change come into the listing ports, for instance, and when that comes in, I approve it, promote it, make it the defined baseline for that particular object or element. But the fact is that when you're looking at the overall integrity and continuously monitoring the overall integrity of a system, then you're not just looking at directories and files, but you have to have the ability to execute, let's say, commands and scripts on the endpoints to harvest additional data that's not located in a file. Okay, that's important. The other thing that we talked about earlier, we kind of spent some time on, was email, and that would be a topic for a whole nother webinar to go through all of the aspects of email monitoring. But with our particular products, or Fortra's particular products, we have the ability to look for email, to classify emails, to classify data that's attached to emails, to classify data that's sitting on systems, whether, to use government terms, secret, unclassified, top secret, etc., or whether it's financial data, or whether it happens to be just, standard user document data. So we classify all that information, but we also have the ability to scan attachments to see whether or not they are known to be malicious, okay, and stop and block them before they even get into an inbox or block. And you've seen that where you've potentially, somebody said, hey, I sent you an email and it got blocked. Why? Because maybe it's got some code attached to it, okay? And so that specific code, maybe you need to zip the file up before you send it over, or maybe you need to take the extension and make it a text file before you send it over to somebody to actually get it there. But that's the benefit to having a tool that's doing integrity, because once I click on that, in that instance, say somebody just renamed some file to a .txt, it drops to my system, I save it, and then when I get to my system, I rename it back from a text file to a BBS or an exe or whatever it might be, or a .shell file, for instance. Then that integrity tool is going to fire immediately, because there's a new file that was dropped on the machine. And if it's an executable type file, hey, we're going to fire another alert, okay? And that will happen not just on the fact that the extension is there, but it will happen on Linux systems if somebody takes a file, for instance, and changes the permissions and runs a chmod and changes the permissions to show 777 or 700, whatever it might be, and 755, 766 executable, either for the owner, the group, or the user, okay? So that's something that's going to fire. And when that happens, then we can kick in an assessment to see whether or not it's a known indicator of compromise. Actually can take the file and move it to a quarantine location, which happens to be that safe and secure spot on your network where you just park data for analysis, and then alert the administrative or the security staff that that incident occurred. So the other thing that we're actually doing that I probably should mention that was on one of those previous polls was the log management and log data. So the fact is that Tripwire has got an event generator built into its agent. So every kind of activity that's occurring on the endpoints is generating events, okay? And those events are getting forwarded back to Tripwire Enterprise, which then disperses them to Splunk, for instance, or O2 Logarithm, or some other log management solution like Tripwire Log Center. And once those events get into that product, then you have the ability to normalize them, correlate on them, okay, and see whether or not they're important. Like Tripwire Log Center happens to be a tool that has the ability to, as a matter of fact, let me move to my next slide here, talk a little bit about that, is I've got these changes that occurred, and I click on the actual server name where the changes occurred, and I pull in the audit trail. And the audit trail happens to be the events that were generated related to that task or that change that occurred in my environment. And so I can drill down into that audit trail and look at the raw data and look at the normalized view of that data. And when I do that, then I can actually determine whether or not I should or should not build a correlation rule in my tool, or just go ahead and take note and report on the fact that there's some malicious activity going on. But the fact is that the amount of data that goes into a log management solution can be enormous. So you need to have the ability to automate that event data as it comes in and take a look at it and correlate on activity that is significant, okay? So Tripwire Log Center happens to be a stateful product, so you could have correlation rules in there that say, hey, I'm looking for something on this particular critical machine out here that's got a high value asset tag to it, okay? If somebody's trying to log into that machine and I've got, let's say, 10 failed logins followed by a successful login in less than 5 minutes. Okay, so that's stateful. Don't fire until after number 10 fails, and if on number 11 I'm good, then I'm going to correlate an alert and take action, maybe even to isolate that machine. So fact is that there's lots of tools out there that are available, but initially you've got to get your systems hardened. Okay, so deploy the infrastructure, get the systems hardened. Using a compliance policy is a very, very good place to start, because that's loaded with policy tests to help you assess whether or not your systems are hardened to a state that matches with a specific standard. Like I said before, that could be one of many different policies. And you don't have to deploy one. You could have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 policies that you're looking at. And if you happen to be a entity that holds government data, maybe your systems integrator like a Lockheed Martin or something, and you've got servers that have government data on them, then you probably got to be compliant to CMMC as well, and which is a cybersecurity maturity model, and maybe 800-171. And so that data that you hold is considered controlled unclassified information. So there's a whole policy set of standards that need to be put in place to make sure that those systems are hardened to meet the specifications required to house government or CUI data. Okay, so anyway, that kind of, we've got about 15 minutes here. This is a list of, we're talking about a drop in the bucket here of some of the policies that are supported by Tripwire and Fortra. And, CIS, COBIT, NERC, NIST, HIPAA, PCI, ISO 27001, and many, many more. Like I said, we have over 3,000 policies and OS combinations. And so let's move over and start taking some questions.
Well, actually, David, you know what? Where you just were is the perfect segue into one of our questions, because we did get a question coming in from the audience about the fact that a lot of these government guidelines that we're talking about get updated regularly. So some of them are quarterly, sometimes annually, sometimes more often and intermittently. So how long from the time, if somebody is needing to make sure that they're meeting these compliance standards, how long does it take Fortra to be able to meet those updating needs as well?
Okay. So Fortra has a team of personnel, our content team, that does nothing but 40 hours a week writing content. Okay, so as it comes up with an update to a STIG, or maybe they add a new STIG, okay, for a new type of device, then we've got members of that team that are monitoring the DISA vulnerability database, and taking a look at the checklist out there that are available from DISA. And when we see a new one that should be supported, then we begin building our own content to match what that STIG requires. Okay, so that includes the whole entire policy or updates to the existing policies that we have in place. And we update and deploy new policies monthly. Okay, so if it happens to be on, let's say, the week that DISA makes a new update, and we don't find out about it until, we'll find out about it almost immediately, but we may begin our process of updating our STIG if it's an update, or if it's a new STIG, developing the content to meet that STIG, and should or may, I would say that you could expect it, depending on the amount of updates, to either be deployed within the next month or at minimum within the next quarter.
Okay, so very quickly, and lots of people paying attention to these updates, which I think is really important, because as we know, they're constant and ongoing. We're going to flip the script on our audience a little bit right now, David, and ask one last poll, and we'll kind of keep rolling with some. There's still more questions to get to, so keep those questions coming in, folks. But while you're doing that, again, click on this poll. Let us know. We're wondering, whether or not you feel, and especially after listening to everything David just said, would you say, and we talked about this at the top, right? We're taking this step back. We're looking at the whole picture. Do you feel that you have, that sufficient security? Do you feel good about the security that you have in place right now? And do you feel like you are ready? And this is why we're here today. So there's no shaming here. Do you feel, after listening to what we've kind of heard from David, that maybe you're not as secure as you thought? You're not feeling as sufficient as you thought? And let us know. We're not going to show anyone's names, so you're not throwing your security team under the bus here. But we are going to show you your results because we're a little curious. I'm curious myself. David, do you have a prediction about where people are going to fall? Do you think more people feel secure or less secure?
I think most people, there's a lot of like new security engineers that are just coming to speed on what's going on their infrastructure. They may feel like they're somewhat secure because they don't quite fully understand the whole overall picture. I think you're going to find people out there that believe that their infrastructure is very tight, okay? And I also, especially since I deal with a lot of government customers who have complete air gap environments, that you'll probably see people that are dropping or selecting that nobody can get into our network. And one of the reasons they can't get in is there's no access. Okay.
So, you're just, totally.
And so you may also see some people saying that, that their environment has leaks and holes. Okay. They know that it does. So maybe they've used a tool like Fortra's Cobalt Strike or Fortra's core solutions tools, are offensive and defensive security tools, and maybe they have them in place, or some tools similar to that where they've actually done a lot of pen testing, and so therefore they have a better view into what their environment looks like today based on what they were able to assess through those offensive tools.
Should we take a look? Testing. Should we see what the results are? Should we see where they line up?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Somewhat.
So heavy in the somewhat category. What do you think, David?
And I would expect that because, commercial companies as well as government entities out there have security tools. They've been putting security tools in place for years. But when they reassess the tools that they have, they're finding out that a lot of the tools that they have are, not quite what they expected them to be. Okay. And don't quite have all the features, functionality that they had hoped for. And so there's always that need to add some new functionality or some new tools. And there's also new exploits, okay, that are happening on, like I said, a daily basis. And because of that, maybe the tools that they have don't have the capability to see some of the newer, I'll say 0-day stuff. And that's happening on a regular basis. And also, I think it's important to note that when you're looking at somewhat secure, that there's a lot of infrastructure out there that has a tool. Maybe it's a log management tool, and maybe it has the ability to do a pass fail, but it doesn't provide any kind of guidance on, tests that are failing. So it might run some light type of compliance checking and without the detail that's needed. So you've got problems, and maybe you feel like you're somewhat secure, but you don't quite know how to fix those problems because you just don't have the tools in place that provide the guidance. And so along the same lines is that there may be a situation where the policy in-house is loose, okay, where you're allowing individuals to have root level access on certain machines, or you're allowing individuals to install their own software. And so you've kind of got an environment there that's really loose, that the tools that you have in-house are not sufficient to monitor everything that's going on. And so, there's a real need to audit. And not to audit, but to audit your own infrastructure, yes, but to get compliant and to get secure and to run vulnerability scans on a regular basis. Okay, so I'm not surprised by the somewhat. Very tight, yes, there's a lot of infrastructures out there where they've got some really high quality security engineers that know exactly what's going on in the infrastructure. They have asset management tools in place. They have vulnerability assessment tools. They have integrity tools, and they're utilizing them on a regular basis, and they're very on top the security. Maybe they run compliance checks and they're 95%, 98% compliant. So, of course, there's some very tight networks out there as well. So I would expect that. And but as you can see, if you combine the somewhat and the has leaks and holes and together, that's 51% essentially of the results. And so there's a need out there, a real need out there for assistance to help make the environments more secure. Good
Well,
poll.
and that, I think, David, you've given us some insight into one of the steps that we can take in order to help address that. So for that 51%, and and high fives and kudos to anyone that's feeling in the extremely very tight and nobody can get in. I love that, and that's awesome. And for those of you in the somewhat has leaks and holes, you know what? High fives to you as well, because the awareness is where you start, right? And so knowing that you need to take some action steps is the first step, and then taking the action step is the next important bit. So David, and I hate to say this because we're just almost out of time. So I wish we could stop and take a few more audience questions. What we're going to do is we're going to make sure that all the questions that we didn't get to get sent on over to your team. So you will have a chance to respond to all the questions asked. So if you have a burning question and you haven't gotten it in, or if you asked and we haven't answered it, stay tuned because you're going to get some answers back. Luckily, I think we were able to answer a lot of the questions coming in as we went through that discussion. But what I want to end on, David, is that action step. So for anyone out there that is in that 51% or is maybe doubting now their other answers, if they want to jump in, they want to get to know Fortra, they want to get started, what would you say is step one?
I would say step one would be to go to Fortra.com, okay, and then once you get to Fortra.com, to look at the product suite. We have over 25 different products that we own, product portfolios, which goes, like I said, from integrity all the way through vulnerability management, email, go anywhere is one of our products, and to file transfer, file management. All those different products are out there on Fortra's website, and to look at the ones that you feel like you're lacking in, and then click on the links that allow you to get in touch with staff that can provide you with a discovery type call, as well as a demonstration of that specific product if needed. So, but I think educating yourself to what's available on Fortra.com, we're developing a suite of cybersecurity tools out there that goes, like I said, pen testing, offensive security, red teaming, all of that stuff is available on our website, from integrity all the way through to vulnerability management and everything in between. So take a look at that, see what's there, and don't be afraid to click a link or pick up the phone and make a call.
I love that. I think that's a great action step, and certainly I think there's quite a few people in the audience who seem to be big, excited fans already. So I think you're going to have some conversations coming at you, David. I want to thank you for such an interesting conversation and for taking us through Fortra, and we just had a really fun time chatting with you today. I hope that we get to that webinar that you teased out with the email. I want to get more into that. So don't threaten me with a good time, my friend. Come back and join us again. We'll dive in a little bit deeper. But David, thanks for joining us here today.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, audience.
All right. And to all of you out there, again, a reminder that your questions are getting sent over to the Fortra team, so you'll get some answers back about that. Another way that you can learn more right away is to go to that handouts tab. So we have some really cool takeaways from the Fortra crew. There's a couple of blog posts. One, 5 key components of cybersecurity hardening. That's a great follow-up. You get those 5 steps. A really fun post. I really like the title, The Bake Off, Ensuring Security in the Cyber Kitchen. That's a great, very, very cute title, but full of information. So make sure you've got those. And then there's also an article that you can read, and you can either read it right in the tab there, or you can download and save for later. And that's Security Configuration Management, Foundational Security with Tripwire Enterprise. So these 3 things, I'm going to highly suggest that you open those tabs, hold on to them, put them aside. We've got just a few minutes here left together, and you're going to want to go back through that information after we wrap. It's a great way to jog your memory, make sure everything that we just heard from David is kind of locked away in there, and get you started on learning a little bit more about Fortra, because of course, this is just step one. We're having this really cool and fun conversation, and then it's where you go from here that really matters. So make sure you've got those handouts, get those last questions in, and while you're doing that, I suppose it's about time for a prize giveaway. So we have a $250 Amazon gift card that we will be giving to someone who is here live, present, and lucky with us at the webinar. And that special somebody is Donna Green of Maine. Donna Green of Maine. Congratulations, Donna. You have won a $250 Amazon gift card. And as always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after we wrap, as well as that best question gift card. We will reach out to you once we've closed our webinar and had a chance to read through all the wonderful questions that we got today. All right, well, with that, on behalf of the ActualTech Media team, I want to, of course, thank Fortra for making this webinar possible. A giant thank you to David for guiding us through such a fun and interactive conversation today. I love, and thank you to all of you for not only asking some questions, but for participating in those polls. I love when we get a chance to do that with you all, and when the speakers get a chance to hear from you as well. I think that really makes a difference in sort of understanding what is important to you, what information you need, where you're at. And it's kind of fun for all of us too, right? When we get to hear, is this what we would expect? Is this kind of within industry standard? Is this what we're seeing as a general trend? And find out, are we sort of in that, or are we an outlier in one way or the other? And that's always really exciting to hear. It really brings us together as part of this community as well. So of course, my biggest high five, my biggest thank you going to all of you out there for taking time to join us today. If you're off tomorrow, this is your Friday. So thanks for taking time out on a Friday. And if you're not off tomorrow, then tomorrow's your Friday. And I hope you have a great Friday. But either way, I want to thank you all for joining us here today, participating in this conversation. I hope you've learned a ton. I know I have. I cannot wait to see you all on a webinar again soon. And until then, have an absolutely beautiful end to your day.